Hi friends, it's story time again. I've got my coffee ready to go. We've been reading the story Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and we're going to get started today. You ready? Let's see, where did we leave off? Oh, they were making bullets. Remember they were making bullets? Putting the shiny new bullets in it, and with the ramrod he pushed the bullets into the cloth and down the gun barrel. Then he pounded them tightly against the powder. When he hit them with the ramrod bounced up in and in the gun barrel, and Pa caught it and thrust it down again. He did this for a long time. Next, he put the ramrod back in its place against the gun barrel. Then, taking the box of caps from his pocket, he raised the hammer of the gun and slipped one of the little bright caps over the hollow pin that was under the hammer. He let the hammer down slowly and carefully. If it came down quickly, bang, the gun would go off. Now the gun was loaded, and Pa laid it on its hooks over the door. When Pa was at home, the gun always lay across those two wooden hooks above the door. Pa had whittled the hooks out of the green sticks with his knife and had driven their straight edges deep into the hollow of the logs. The hooked end curved upwards and held the gun securely. The gun was always loaded and always above the door so that Pa could get it quickly and easily any time he needed the gun. When Pa went into the big woods, he always made sure that the bullet pouch was full of bullets and that the tin patch box and the box of caps were with it in his pocket. The powder horn and the small shape hatchet hung at his belt, and he carried the gun ready loaded on his shoulder. He always reloaded the gun as soon as he had fired it, for, he said, he did not want to meet trouble with an empty gun. Whenever he shot at a wild animal, he had to stop and reload the gun, measure the powder, put it in, and shake it down, put it in the patch and the bullet and the powder them down, and then put a fresh cap under the hammer before he could shoot again. When he shot at a bear or a panther, he must kill it with the first shot. A wounded bear or a panther could kill a man before he had time to load his gun again. But Laura and Mary were never afraid when Pa went alone into the big woods. They knew he could always kill bears and panthers with just one shot. After the bullets were made and the gun was loaded, came story time. "Tell us about the voice in the woods," Laura would beg him. Pa cracked his eyes at her. "Oh, no," he said. "You don't want to hear about the time I was a naughty little boy." "Oh, yes, we do," Laura and Mary said, so Pa began. The story of Pa and the voice in the big woods. Picture. When I was a little boy, not much bigger than Mary, I had to go every afternoon to find the cow in the woods and drive them home. My father told me never to play by the way, but to hurry and bring the cow home after dark, because there were bears and wolves and panthers in the woods. One day I started earlier than usual, so I thought I did not need to hurry. There were so many things to see in the woods that I forgot that dark was coming. There were red squirrels in the trees, chipmunks scurrying through the leaves, and little rabbits playing games together in the open places. Little rabbits, always have games together before they go to bed. I began to play. I was a mighty hunter, stalking the wild animals and the Indians. I played I was fighting the Indians until the woods seemed full of wild men, and then all at once I heard the birds twittering good night. It was dusky in the path and the dark in the woods. I knew that I must get the cows home quickly, or it would be black night before they were safe in the barn, and I couldn't find the cows. I listened, but I could not hear their bells. I called, but the cows didn't come. I was afraid of the dark and the wild beast, but I dared not go home to my father without the cows. So I ran through the woods, hunting and calling. All the time the shadows were getting thicker and darker, and the woods seemed larger, and the trees and the bushes looked strange. I could not find them cows anywhere. I climbed up hills, looked for them and calling, and I went down into the dark ravines, calling and looking. I stopped and listened for the cowbells, and there was not a sound but the rustling of the leaves. Then I heard loud breathing and thought a panther was there in the dark behind me, but it was only my own breathing. My bare legs were scratched by the briars, and when I ran through the bushes, their branches struck me. But I kept on looking and calling, "Suki, Suki, 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 Suki!" I shouted with all my might, "Suki!" Right over my head, something asked, "Who?" My hair stood up on end. Who? The voice said again. And then how I did ran. I forgot all about the cows. All I wanted was to get out of the dark woods and to get home. That thing in the dark came after me and called again, "Ooh!" I ran with all my might. I ran till I couldn't breathe, and still I kept on running. Something grabbed my foot and down I went. Up I jumped and then I ran. Not even a wolf could have caught me. At last I came out of the dark woods by the barn. There stood all the cows waiting for me to let them in the barn. I let them in, and then I ran to the house. My father looked up and said, "Young man, what makes you so late? Been playing by the way?" I looked down at my feet, and then I saw at my one big toenail had been torn clean off. I'd been so scared that I had not felt it hurt till just that minute. Pa always stopped telling the story here and waited till Laura said, picture. There's Pa running through the trees. Can you tell who said hoo hoo? Waited until Laura said, "Go on, Pa. Please, go on." "Well," Pa said, "then my grandpa went out into the yard and cut a short switch. And he came back into the house and gave me a good thrashing so that I would remember to mind him after that. A boy 9 years of old is old enough to remember to mind," he said. "There's a good reason for what I tell you to do," he said. "And if you'll do as you're told, no harm will come to you." Yes, Pa," Laura would say, bouncing up and down on Pa's knee. And then what did he say?" "He said, if you don't obey me as you should, you wouldn't have to been out in the big woods after dark, and you wouldn't have been scared by a screeching owl." Chapter 4. Christmas. Christmas is coming. The little log cabin was almost buried in snow. Great drifts were banked against the walls and the windows in the morning when Pa opened the door. There was a wall of snow as high as Laura's head. Pa took the shovel and shoveled it away, and then he shoveled a path to the barn where the horses and the cows were snug and warm in their stalls. The days were clear and bright. Laura and Mary stood on chairs by the window and looked. Oh, here's a picture. There's the snow, and they're playing in the snow. Out across the glittering snow at the glittering trees. Snow was piled all along their bare, dark branches, and it sparkled in the sunshine. Icicles hung from the eaves of the house to the snowbanks, great icicles as large at the top as Laura's arm. They were like glass and full of sharp light. Pa's breath hung in the air like smoke when he came along the path from the barn. He breathed it out in clouds, and it froze in white frost on his mustache and beard. When he came in, stamping the snow from his boots, and caught Laura up in his bear's hug against his cold, big coat, his mustache was beaded with little drops of melted frost. Every night he was busy, working on a large piece of board and two small pieces. He whittled them into his knife with his knife. He rubbed them with sandpaper with his palm of his hand until then Laura touched them and they felt smooth and soft as silk. Then with his sharp jackknife he worked at them, cutting the edges of the large one into little peaks and towers with a large star carved on the very tallest point. He cut little holes through the wood. He cut the holes in shapes of windows and little stars and crescent moons and circles. All around them he carved tiny leaves and flowers and birds. One of the little boards he shaped in a lovely curve, and around it edged he curved leaves and flowers and stars, and through it he cut crescent moons and curlicues. Around the edge of the smallest board, he carved a tiny flowering vine. He made the tiniest shavings, cutting very slowly and carefully, making whatever he thought would be pretty. At last, he had a piece of finished, and one night he fitted them together. When this was done, the big piece was a beautiful carved back for a smooth little shelf across its middle, with a smooth little shelf across its middle. The large star was at the very top of it. The carved pieces supported the shelf underneath of it was carved beautiful too, and the little vine ran along the edge of the shelf. Pa had made this bracket for a Christmas present for Ma. He hung it carefully against the log wall between the windows, and Ma stood her little China woman on the shelf. The little China woman had a china bonnet on her head, and a china curls hung against her china neck. Her china dress was laced across in front, and she wore a pale pink china apron and a little gilt china shoes. She was beautiful, standing on the shelf with flowers and leaves and birds and moons carved all around her, and the large star at the very top. Ma was busy all day long cooking good things for Christmas. She baked salt rising bread and rye and Indian bread and Swedish crackers and a huge pan of baked beans with salt pork and molasses. She baked vinegar pies and dried apple pies and filled a jar with cookies, and she let Laura and Mary lick the cake spoon. One morning, she boiled molasses and sugar together until they made a thick syrup, and Pa brought in 2 pans of clear white snow from the outdoors. Laura and Mary each had a pan, and Pa and Ma showed them how to pour the dark syrup in the little streams in the snow. They made circles and curlicues and squiggly things, and these hardened at once, and they were candy. Laura and Mary might eat one each, but the rest was saved for Christmas Day. I'm going to stop right there for today, boys and girls. I love you. I miss you. Have a great day.